Kevin's nest is on fire.
Kevin set it on fire. On purpose, more or less, in the sense that he stuffed it with fireworks to see what would happen, which is the closest thing Kevin has to a financial strategy. And right now, sunglasses on, wings tucked behind his head, reclining in a lawn chair he very obviously cannot afford, Kevin is watching his home burn to the ground with the serene, sun-kissed calm of a bird who has never once, in his entire life, paid for anything.
You've met Kevin. For 6 episodes now, you've watched this park detonate in increasingly creative ways. Pigeons started a world war over a French fry. An economy got nuked by a loaf of bread. A bird bath was destroyed out of sheer politeness. A worm shortage ruined a grown man's love life. One bird bought the entire park, and another bird guarded a worthless rock for 4 hours. 6 episodes, 6 disasters, and through every single one of them, one bird, our scrawny hero Pete, did everything right, played it safe, and lost everything anyway.
And the bird who did everything wrong? The bird who borrowed insane amounts, bet it all on nonsense, and behaved in every episode like consequences were a rumor? Kevin. Kevin is fine. Kevin is, in fact, getting richer.
Today we find out why. And it is the single most important question in economics that nobody puts on a poster. Not why do smart birds win, but why do reckless birds keep winning? The answer is a thing called moral hazard, and once you see it, you will never unsee who is actually holding the bill. Here's the clean version, because the trap hides in the gap. Moral hazard is what happens when the bird who makes a risky decision is not the bird who pays if it goes wrong. Shield someone from the downside of a risk, and they will take more of it. Not because they're evil, because the cost stopped being theirs. That's it. That's the whole engine. The decider and the bearer come apart. One bird makes the bet, a different bird eats the loss. And the instant those 2 birds are different birds, the bets get insane. Watch it happen to a completely normal pigeon. This is Dave. Dave is careful. Dave locks his worm cart every night, flies the speed limit, keeps his 1 crumb in a sock. Then Dave buys insurance. A nice policy. If anything happens to the cart, Gary's worm insurance covers it. And something shifts in Dave that Dave will never admit. He starts leaving the cart unlocked, just for a second. He parks it on the hill. He stops checking the brakes. Dave hasn't become a bad bird. Dave has simply stopped being the one who pays, and his behavior quietly, automatically, follows the money. Give a bird airbags and a seatbelt and a helmet, and the bird drives faster. The protection doesn't just catch the fall, it invites the jump. So now scale Dave's little shrug up to a bird who has turned it into a career. Kevin. Kevin's genius, and I want to be precise because it is not intelligence, is that Kevin has spent 6 episodes making sure the upside is always his and the downside is always somebody else's. Heads, Kevin wins. Tails, you lose. He borrows other birds' worms to make his bets, so if the bet hits, the winnings are Kevin's. And if it craters, well, it was never Kevin's worm in the first place, was it? Back in the crumb crisis, he borrowed 1,000 crumbs and let inflation vaporize the debt. During the worm shortage, he leveraged up to his eyeballs and got nauseatingly rich while the lenders ate the risk. Kevin is not a gambler. A gambler can lose. Kevin has architected a beautiful little life in which he cannot. Brenda, who left Pete for Kevin back in the worm shortage, you will remember, is under the deeply mistaken impression that she married a financial genius. She married a bird who has simply never once been handed the check. Economists have a stuffy name for the deeper version of this, and you should know it because it explains roughly half of all bad behavior by powerful institutions. The principal-agent problem. The principal is the bird whose worms are actually at stake. The agent is the bird who gets to decide what to do with them. When those are the same bird, decisions are careful. When they split apart, when one bird is playing with another bird's worms, the agent gets brave with money that was never his. It's the contractor who picks the most expensive option because you're paying. It's the coworker who orders the lobster because it's on the company card. It's every bird who has ever been generous, bold, and visionary with somebody else's crumbs. Which brings us, inevitably, to Gary. Gary, fresh off losing his monopoly and his claw machine racket, has opened the most dangerous business in the park, a bank. The Park Worm Bank. Every sensible bird in the park, Pete very much included, deposits their hard-saved worms with Gary for safekeeping. And Gary, sitting on a mountain of everybody else's worms, has a realization that lights up his beady little eyes. These aren't really his worms. The losses, if there are losses, land on the depositors. But the profits, if he gambles those worms on something wild and it pays off, those he keeps. Gary is now playing the highest stakes game in the park with a stack of chips that belong entirely to other people. So Gary does exactly what the incentive begs him to do. He bets the bank. All of it. On the worm futures market, on Kevin's fireworks startup, on a frankly upsetting pyramid scheme involving acorns. Why wouldn't he? It's not his worm. And here is where a well-meaning toddler accidentally pours gasoline on everything. Because the park has a government, and the park's government is Timmy, who is 6. And the flock, terrified of losing their savings if Gary's bank ever fell over, went to Timmy and asked for a safety net. So Timmy, benevolent and sticky-fingered, issued a decree. If the worm bank ever fails, the government, me, will make every depositor whole. A guarantee. A promise that nobody's savings can ever truly be lost. It sounds lovely. It is a catastrophe with a bow on it. Because the second that guarantee exists, watch what it does to Gary. Before the guarantee, Gary's depositors watched him like hawks, ready to yank their worms at the first whiff of recklessness. That nervous scrutiny was the leash. After the guarantee, the depositors stop caring. Why check on the bank? Timmy's got it covered. The leash drops. And Gary, now playing with worms whose owners have stopped watching, backed by a toddler who has promised to cover any hole, stops gambling and starts doing something closer to lighting money on fire for fun. The safety net didn't catch the fall. The safety net became a trampoline. This is the cruel little law underneath every bailout in history. Protect a bird from failure completely, and you don't get a careful bird. You get a bird who has no reason on earth to be careful. And it gets a name that should make your feathers stand up. Too big to fail. Gary's bank grows so enormous, holds so many birds' worms, that everyone knows Timmy could never actually let it collapse. The whole park would go down with it, which Gary knows. Which means Gary can take wilder and wilder bets, secure in the knowledge that he has the entire park hostage. Win, and he's rich. Lose, and he's too important to be allowed to lose. He has privatized the gains and socialized the losses, which is a fancy way of saying, when it goes well, it's Gary's. When it goes badly, it's yours. And one grim Tuesday, it goes badly. The acorn pyramid scheme collapses. Kevin's fireworks startup, predictably, explodes. Gary's bank is suddenly a smoking crater with a sign that says, "Whoops!" And the bill, the enormous smoking bill, has to be paid by somebody. It is paid, of course, by Pete. Because that's what a bailout is. Timmy keeps his promise and covers the losses. And Timmy's only source of worms is the park's taxes. And the park's most reliable taxpayer is the one bird who never gambled, never borrowed, never did anything wrong. Prudent, careful, responsible Pete. Pete, who kept his worms in a sock. Pete, who read the fine print. Pete now watches his savings get quietly drained to refill the hole that Gary and Kevin dug, having the time of their lives. The reckless got rescued. The careful got the invoice. Pete didn't just lose. Pete got specifically punished for being the only adult in the room. And somewhere across the park, Kevin, who walked away from the wreckage with his bonus already spent, waves. If this is ringing a faint and expensive bell, it should, because the biggest version of it happened in the real world, and you helped pay for it. A pile of enormous banks spent years making wild bets with other birds' money, perfectly certain that if it ever blew up, they were too big to be allowed to fail. It blew up. They were rescued. And the part that should genuinely keep you up at night, a great many of the birds who lit the fire kept their bonuses and flew home. Gains, private. Losses, yours. Nobody went to the nest. That isn't a conspiracy theory. That's just moral hazard, fully grown, wearing a very nice suit. And this, the second you learn its shape, is absolutely everywhere, and it is never going to look innocent again. It's the giant bank that makes lunatic bets because it knows it'll be rescued, and is, with your worms, and whose executives keep their bonuses anyway. It's the bonus itself. Pay a bird a fortune when the bet wins, and nothing worse than you're fired when it loses. And you have built a machine that begs that bird to bet the world. The upside is theirs, the downside is the shareholders. It's the company that pollutes because the cost lands on the town downstream. It's limited liability, where you can lose only what you put in, so you swing for the fences with money that was never fully yours. It's the rental car that gets driven like it was stolen. It's the all-you-can-eat plate from last episode, the buffet of consequences nobody has to finish. It's the surgeon who gets a little cavalier because the malpractice policy will swallow the mistake, and the patient who skips the checkup because the plan covers whatever eventually breaks. It's antibiotics flung at every sniffle because the resistance that builds up is tomorrow's problem and some other park's bird. Every single time, the same fracture. The bird making the choice is not the bird who pays for it. There's also a sneaky sibling worth one beat because the two of them always travel together. Before Gary even sells a single worm insurance policy, he's got a problem. The birds who most want insurance are exactly the birds who fly drunk into windows. The careful pigeons figure they'll be fine and don't bother. The reckless ones line up at dawn. So Gary's pool of customers quietly fills up with disasters in waiting, which is a separate trap called adverse selection. Keep them straight. Adverse selection is who shows up to buy the insurance. Moral hazard is how they behave once they've got it. Same root rot, though. The bird with the information and the bird holding the risk are not the same bird. Now, and this is the honest catch, because moral hazard has a saintly twin and people forget it exists. Safety nets are not the villain here. This is the part the angry birds get wrong. Insurance is good. Genuinely, deeply good. The whole point of insurance is to let careful birds take sensible risks. Open the worm farm, fly to the next park, start the business, without one bad storm wiping them out forever. Limited liability built every great thing in the park, because no sane bird risks everything they own to try something new. A world with zero safety net isn't a responsible world. It's a terrified one, where nobody ever takes a chance and nothing ever gets built. We want the net. The net is the point. The disease is never the net. The disease is a net with no string attached to the bird doing the jumping. Moral hazard isn't people are protected, it's people are protected and feel none of the downside, so they stop being careful at all. The cure was never to rip the net away. The cure is to make sure the jumper still has something real to lose. And that cure has the best name in all of economics: skin in the game. You don't fix Kevin by banning risk. You fix Kevin by making sure some of his own worms are on the line every single time he bets. The instant Kevin can personally lose, Kevin, miraculously, instantly, becomes careful. It is the most reliable transformation in the park. A bird with nothing at stake is a daredevil. Give that exact same bird one crumb of his own on the table, and he turns into an accountant. So that's what the park finally does, and it's elegant. Mildred, stern, accountable Mildred, the one bird who has read every word of the fine print, marches in and rewrites the rules. The insurance now has a deductible. Dave has to eat the first chunk of any loss, so Dave locks his card again, instantly, the very same evening. The bank has to keep its own worms in the game, a real cushion of Gary's own savings that burns first if his bets go bad. So suddenly, Gary discovers caution he never knew he had. The bailout comes with a clawback. Take a reckless bonus, and if the bet blows up later, the worms come back out of your nest. And the blanket will cover everything guarantee gets a limit and a leash. So depositors start watching the bank again, which was the whole point. Make the decider feel the downside, even a little, and the insanity just evaporates. Not because anyone got nicer, because the math finally has their name on it. And does it work? It works beautifully. The park's bank gets boring and safe almost overnight. Risk falls. The savings stop vanishing. The leash is back on. For everyone, that is, except Kevin. Because Kevin is Kevin. And in the 3 days between Mildred announcing the new rules and the new rules taking effect, Kevin, who somehow always knows, quietly sold every scrap of his risk to a slower bird, pocketed the worms, and bought a beach. He has skin in nobody's game now, least of all his own. The park got fixed, the lesson got learned, and Kevin still walked away rich, one more time, sunglasses gleaming, because the truly great practitioners of moral hazard are always, always, one step ahead of the bird who finally writes the rule. Pete, naturally, is still paying off the bailout. Pete will be paying off the bailout for a while. So here's the moral, and it's a sneaky big one. The danger was never risk. Risk is fine. Risk is how anything good ever gets built. The danger is risk with no cost attached to the bird taking it. The split second the bird making the bet stops being the bird who pays for the bet. That's the whole disease, in finance, in insurance, in pollution, in your own life. Somebody is being bold and visionary and daring, with downside that quietly belongs to somebody else. So whenever a bird is being weirdly fearless, don't ask if they're brave. Ask the only question that matters. Whose worms are actually on the line? If the answer isn't theirs, you have not found a genius. You found a Kevin. And somewhere quietly, you might be the one holding his bill. Watch the skies, guard your worms, and always, always check whose tail feathers are on the line before you trust the bird who isn't scared. Subscribe.